if I would be a patient, I would never transfer non-tested embryo. What for? Realistic statistics for the clinical pregnancy rate in egg donation is over 60% in the first embryo transfer. Cumulative result in the oocyte donation is over 90%.
Okay.
Because not always we are getting implantation in the single first embryo transfer, and then we need to try to understand the patient potential for the implantation. Something is not working there. Unfortunately, ovary is the first organ to age in women's body, and we can live more than half of our life without potential support, hormonal support. This is very important as well. But also if the fertility sphere hasn't been completed, like this task for the woman hasn't been completed, if we will think about potential of preserving the function of this organ for a little bit longer, this is possible. We need to learn it more deeper, but from what is preliminarily known right now, if we will start it in time, we will be successful in this treatment.
Jó napot kívánok, szervusztok! Vereczkey Attila vagyok, a Fertility Forumnak a megálmodója. Nagyon nagy szeretettel jelentem be következő vendégünket, dr. Uliana Dorofeyevát, akit külföldről hívtunk meg, jelen esetben Szlovákiából érkezett. Doktornő meddőségi specialista, aki elsősorban szülészetnőgyászati gyakorlat után a világhírt lényegében az innovatív reproduktív technikák megoldásában találta, rendszeres előadója a világvezető kongresszusainak, az ESRI-nek, az ESRM-nek, tudományos munkák és kutatási publikációk sorozatát végzi a kollégáival. Jelentős szakmai múlt áll mögötte, és a különös specialitása a komplex és nehéz meddőségi esetek megoldása. Ő Ukrajnában született, az egyetemet a Lvov orvosi egyetemen végezte, majd nagyon hamar külföldön folytatta a tanulmányait, Izraelben, Írországban, Angliában fertilitási prezervációs területen foglalkozott, de a fő területe jelenleg a fertilitás megőrzése és az úgynevezett rejuvenation technologies, a megújulás, megfrissítés, petefészek frissítésnek a technológiája. Egyébként ő alapítója a ukrajnai Ovogene petesejtési varsejtbanknak, ami világhírű szolgáltatásaival a világvezető ilyen donációs bankjává nőtte ki magát, illetve nemrég egy klinikát vásárolt Pozsonyban, Szlovákiában, Ferticen néven, ahol a munkatársaival nemrég kezdték el a fantasztikus munkásságukat, teljesítményüket. Úgyhogy nagy szeretettel mutatom be nektek a kiváló kolléganőnket, azzal a céllal, hogy beszélgessünk egy kicsit a modern, innovatív technológiákról, ami esetleg hozzá tud segíteni abban, hogy minket is, meg a pácienseket is, hogy a saját kezelésük sikeresebb legyen és nagyobb hatékonysággal tudjon működni. So, Uliana, thank you for coming. I changed to English now. I made a little introduction to you, and thank you for accepting my invitation. And you drove here, you traveled to Budapest, and thank you for participating in this podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me here. I love the city, it's wonderful, and I really happy to have collaboration with Versys, with the whole team, and with you especially, Attila. And you know, we are not alone in this field, and only with collaborations and being like-minded in the patient approach, in the overall treatment and management, we can do really different achievements and results, and patients value this. And I really value our partnership and connections and support. So great to be here.
Thank you. Again, I think we have many points and many strategies in common between us because you are one of the leader in our area in terms of fertility preservation, rejuvenation technologies and involving modern technologies to our daily practice, like artificial intelligence, which is recently became very popular in our area. But let's go to the basics, Uliana. If I can start with questions. You were born in Ukraine, and you have worked in several locations in the world. Like I know that we met in Australia, we met in London, UK, and all the major conferences in the world, so almost everywhere. And now you started in Slovakia with your own clinic because you had to move, obviously, from Ukraine. Could you tell me a little bit of the circumstances, what forced you to move abroad from Ukraine? And also I would like to ask you what changes you have noticed in the Ukrainian healthcare system after this terrible situation which was happening there and still happening.
Yeah, I'm Ukrainian and I studied and graduated in Ukraine. We have a wonderful opportunity of practice fertility sphere because all technologies, all clinics, they were private, but the regulations, they were very broad and very flexible in terms of, for example, third-party reproduction, which is a big part of fertility sphere, as the experimental treatments, they were available on the patient basis consent, and this is something what is shifting fertility right now. I started in 2008, and I remember the time when we were using just the single similar protocol for all. There was no individualization. Either this is a patient of 25 years old or a good responder in 45 years old. Or at some points we said, unfortunately, we cannot help you because you're already too old. And because of this, and the only option what was possible in that time was the egg donation. So I started as a very young gynecologist, focused on the fertility in clinic, which was quite busy clinic. And I'm always saying that fertility counts not how many years you are in this, but how many cases have you been practicing and supervising. And this is how you understand what's going on and how you can predict, how you can impact, how you make sure that what you are practicing will work. But since 2008 until today, we changed the approach a lot. Every year there is something new. From one protocol which we've been using, now we have plenty of protocols. We understood that only natural stimulation in the early follicular phase was working, and we were discussing, should we start on day 2 or day 4? Is it better or worse? Now we are not discussing this anymore. That's because we are starting at any day of the cycle, because we know that the follicular development is a constant process. And this is something what is changing the paradigm. But the question is it true and is it practiced in all facilities, or still some of them are still more conservative and they are following the approach which was working because that was a good approach. We are saying like this approach is bringing us to the point of success. But if we are open-minded and we are learning more and we are understanding what else is possible and we are not limiting ourselves with just the standardized approaches, then we have more tools, we have more instruments, and we can build something different, and this brings us to the success. So even when I was in Ukraine in 2008, I was a person dedicated for the international collaboration. The clinic I've been working for, it was the first clinic which was working internationally, was the Irish Center. And I received my great practice was in Dublin under the supervision of the clinical director, embryological director, and the quality manager. So this is how I learned also the quality management system, the risk assessment, the personal management of the staff, because you cannot do fertility alone. You need to have a team, and this is another point of success. Reproductologist is a good reproductologist if you are a clever one, you understand the processes, but you cannot be successful without good laboratory. Yeah, if you have a strong team in the lab, this is when you are bringing material in and you are sure which material you are taking out from the lab in order to bring it back to the patient. This is how the system works.
Actually, thank you for saying this out, because I think this is one of the most important strategy for us in the future to bring the embryology lab as the same importance level than the clinical practice. So we have to work hand in hand with the embryologists, like clinicians, because together we can achieve a nice success or we can fail the process. But turning back to Ukrainian legislation for a minute, that Ukraine was very famous before the war because of its quite liberal legislation. So you were very famous of egg donation programs, even surrogacy, I think, was available, same-sex couples. And you had plenty of foreign patients from Germany, Switzerland. So the fertility tourism was towards Ukraine because the legislation was good, the clinic was good, and as you said, everybody made the private institutions, private clinics. You achieved fantastic results and fantastic safety and quality issues there. So the whole IVF treatment was very successful as a profile in the healthcare system in Ukraine. Do you think that these legislation issues are an important point for making an IVF sector successful? Or do you think that, for example, what happened in Hungary, like the nationalization, where they closed the private institutions and they kept under the national control, when the success rate dropped a lot, we don't have PGTA program, we don't have egg donation, we don't have surrogacy, we don't have actually egg freezing for same-sex couples, so many procedures are not allowed, not available for patients in Hungary, but Ukraine was different. Just please tell me how do you see, what were your experience in this having a little liberal approach by legislation in terms of success rates and safety and the quality issues in the treatments before the war, of course.
So regulation is very important. We don't want to break any rule. And this is like we promise to help patients. This is the same what we do under, like everything what is possible, it's under the regulation. However, in order to be more flexible, we need to allow things to happen, and not by regulating, we need really to put the rules, but not to abandon this. Because if we are abandoning, we are limiting the options for clinicians to practice new things, to perform clinical trials, for example, because this is how we will understand if this works. Animal models need to be shifted to the clinical trials. And then after we have a clinical trial successful, this is how we understand we can practice this technology. In general, this field, our fertility field, is very young. It's below 50 years. Louisa Brown is still below 50, and we are talking now about so many changes, and who are ruling these changes. Now, like if we were saying that this was governments or the professional institutions who are ruling the changes, I see more and more that patients are those who are forcing the changes to happen. And fertility tourism, this is something what is very common in our sphere. We can say that after probably oncology and beauty, fertility is always number 2 or number 3. They are changing. And for Ukraine, we had, I remember the best time for the clinic I was involved with was 2019, because that was before the COVID. So we had one more problem, which was global problem, that was COVID. And then just after we solved that issue or resolved this, in Ukraine, the war started. And patients were coming to Ukraine from many destinations. In 2019, there were more than 100 licensed institutions, like clinics, in Ukraine. You can imagine which level of competition was there. But competition is always great, because if you compete, you are becoming better. Becoming not better than someone, but becoming better than you were.
Than you were before. Yes, absolutely.
Like last month, because you are doing KPIs, you are having quality control, you are checking the performances, you are improving, you are thinking about new methods in the diagnostics, you analyze the patient better because you want the patient to, you want you to be successful, but you being successful brings the patient being successful. So this is all a teamwork. And that's why, like, I learned this from Ukraine, and I believe, and I know for sure, we are a very strong nation, and I still hope that situation, even how it is right now, it will be resolved. Clinics are still working, they are great, we have wonderful doctors, wonderful embryologists, great performance as IVF. Regulators are trying to change the law, but I hope it will be regulated but not abandoned in the specific techniques which are under the discussion right now. But this is normal practice to review, let's say, in quality, in clinic, we review our procedures, our SOPs, because they are changing, we are improving, so we need to review this. So it's good to review the law, but it's wrong method to limit the options for both patients and professionals.
Absolutely, I fully agree, and thank you for highlighting this out, because I absolutely believe and thinking on the same direction like you are, that the legislation is important, especially in the UK, which has one of the best reproductive medicine in the world. There is a HFVA, the Human Fertility Embryology Authority, which is a very, very strict and powerful authorization body, but it's open-minded, open for discussion, and they make things happen, and they open to discuss new technologies, but they regulate very strictly, and this results very high quality of reproductive medicine services. So you have been working in several countries now in Slovakia, and you have seen different patients from different cultures and different background. Do you see any differences between this kind of different patients, like any different approaches? Do you see any religious or any social differences between group of patients in terms of approaching reproductive medicine treatments?
There are some, but what makes all patients very similar, this is the fact the problem which they want to solve. Patients are different. For example, there is different approach from communication between a patient and clinician, for example, in the US and Europe, or from patients who are coming from Asia, based on how many questions patients ask, how well educated patients are. And this is wonderful to have patients being educated and to have a proper discussion, how good they are following the recommendations, or they are making decisions to, because this is based on their previous experience. They are always bringing their previous experience into their future. Mm-hmm. But not always approaches can be same. And if we will be open to a different approach, to a little bit different scenario, under the responsibility of the clinical team, but with a patient being heard, and together being a team, we will create an algorithm and a plan that will be success. Without being a team with the patient, or without trust of a patient to her doctor or the team, because it's not only doctor is never alone, as I said, about the embryology coordinators, administrators. This is all a feeling about this journey, because this is a fertility journey, specifically if we are talking about international patients who need to travel, who need to manage accommodation, they need to manage tickets, they need to manage scans, hormones, medications, prescriptions, etc. So this is all part of the journey. But if there is a trust, this trust builds more results
success.
And the long term, because that's how we learn about the patient. And I believe also that longer patient is with the clinician, better success she may achieve, because profiles are very different, and having individualization in protocols, dosage, medications, there is variety in the cycle. There is variety based on the different factors. If we are learning all this, if we are controlling all deficiencies, if we are taking time to improve and we learn from the previous experience, then we really can improve. Although we are moving ahead in the time and patient is getting older, because I'm working with our average age of patients is over 45. So this is a quite complicated group of patients. However, and because we cannot be successful for all of them, not for 100%, it's impossible in the fertility sphere, but we are really trying to do our best. But this percentage who will not be successful, unfortunately, this gives some emotional background for us also as a clinical team, because we want to deliver good news, we want to bring success, but if there is this trust, we will be there in this point. That's important.
Absolutely, Uliana, and you are founder of Ovogene Egg Donation Bank, which is one of the biggest in Central Europe and also in Europe. So you have a huge experience in egg donation programs. What is the average result? What we can offer for patients with egg donation? Because you touched a little bit the success rate issues, and then let's talk if we touch this issue now. That what is the average success what you were able already to achieve with egg donation programs? And do you see any changes between the recipient's age? Because this is also an important part of the picture.
So egg donation in general, this is a great opportunity for patients to be successful when we have already some limitations. We are discussing now, having all the technologies which we are using, we are discussing about egg donation as the last point. Because if we can improve patient success using her own eggs with the technologies like the oocyte activation, like the AI for the embryo development, like the individual cultivation protocols, not just individual stimulation protocol, but also individual cultivation protocol, because we have a lot of deficiencies in the advanced egg, inside the egg, so it's something what can be still corrected. But if this approach will not work, or patient had already many trials in this, and by learning her previous history we understand that we need to move further, then we discuss the options which are also available. Statistically, in the clinics globally, that would be about 20 to 30% of patients who would need oocyte donation.
That's quite a huge number, right? Because
it's a very big number, right?
It's absolutely great, because I think in Hungary we have about 150, 200,000 patients. So if you're talking about 20 to 30%, which I fully agree with, needed for egg donation program, with these several thousands of cycles which are not available in Hungary. Do you see patients, Hungarian patients abroad? I know that you treat quite a lot in all locations where you are. What is your experience with Hungarian patients in general? How you see them? Do they have any differences than other patients? Do they have different needs, or do they have a different age specifications or something?
We used to have patients, Hungarian patients in Ukraine, quite many, because we are relatively close by. So that's the country where you can travel easy, just crossing single border and you are there. The culture is not that different, language is different, of course, but we can always manage this with the arrangements in the clinic. Now, being in Slovakia, we see even more Hungarian patients. That's a huge amount of patients who are coming to Slovakia looking specifically for the oocyte donation. And we started Ovogene, that's many years ago, or in general egg banking, that I was involved since 2008. But the oocyte freezing was possible since 2011, because this is when we learned about vitrification. Before vitrification, that was a different process, slow freezing, which was not very good for the oocytes.
Not as good as vitrification.
Right, so we improved a lot also in this sphere. So since that time, since we started, we understood that we can freeze the eggs for the future needs. We can first educate patient that she as a patient can freeze her eggs in order to use them in the future, or someone who is just wasting her eggs in the regular cycle can do a really great job and donate them for someone else. We are donating blood, and this is very common, and we support this process. Why we are not discussing about oocyte donation? Because we as women, we are losing 99.99% of our eggs during our lifetime, because we are ovulating with the single egg, while the recruitment every cycle depends on age, is different, but it can be 10, 20 eggs every cycle. Follicles which are dying in the end of the cycle. So if we do stimulation, we can support them to produce the egg. This is not bringing us to closer menopause. This is not worsening our health status, etc. So this is a great procedure to be done. But we just need to educate both patients, potential donors, and clinicians as well, because not everyone knows that this process is that safe, easy, and this helps us to improve our chances in fertility, because globally population is lowering the number of kids we are delivering globally. Some cultural differences, some countries, they would support more having more kids, but in general this is changing. Mm-hmm. But what is interesting, that who lowers to deliver the babies? These are younger generation who doesn't need oocyte donation, and patients over 40 or 35 plus to up to early 50s, their amount of these patients is increasing. They want to have babies, but we as a practice, as a fertility practice, we have limited ability to help them. Either we need to use for them these innovative technologies which are effective, we need to try them for them, or we need to offer them oocyte donation. And there is no correlation if patient, I'm always saying that capability for implanting the embryo with the proper preparation of the endometrium is almost unlimited. And there is no difference, either this patient is 35 and she needs oocyte donation, or she is 45 or she is 49. If this is her lifetime to have a baby, this is her rule to make it possible. Because patient can choose a doctor, patient can choose a clinic, patient can choose a country, how she can be treated and where she can be treated. And this is our like what we can do naturally, and we just need to help them, we as doctors.
Yeah, absolutely. But you know the figures, right? You know the statistical results. So what do you think that could be a realistic chance statistically in an egg donation program by having 7 to 10 eggs from an egg donor who is below 35 years of age, like 30? What the recipient chance could be? Because I'd like you to mention the range of the success which could be achievable, because I think this is the most important point for telling the patient with an egg donation program, you have about this and these numbers. So you have had so many and thousands of cycles. What is your experience? What is realistically can be achievable for recipients if you have a good donation program?
Realistic statistics for the clinical pregnancy rate in egg donation is over 60% in the first embryo transfer. If we are talking about cumulative result that we are getting from the donor, let's say 8, 10, 12 oocytes, how many she is donating, we are fertilizing them with the partner sperm, we are creating embryos, and we have a set of embryos, and we are transferring all these embryos, which is called the cumulative result. Cumulative result in the oocyte donation is over 90%. Okay. Because not always we are getting implantation in the single first embryo transfer, and then we need to try to understand the patient potential for the implantation. Something is not working there. Endometrium, uterus, thyroid, hormones, immune system, any other disorders, systemic things. So once everything is checked, but we still have more embryos, we will do another trial. And if we will have cumulative result and we still have the embryos, our success is just great. So I'm always saying with the egg donation, with someone who has a high potential for implantation, we cannot promise, because we can never promise the result, but with the high expectancy, we can say that this patient will be pregnant.
Okay, that's very important to highlight again, because I don't know if we know in general medical practice a kind of procedure like treating reproductive medicine with IVF program, whatever's own eggs or egg donation or PGT, whatever, to achieve more than 90% success rate. I don't know if oncology, surgery, ophthalmology, internal medicine, or whatever can be able to achieve this high number of success. But could you imagine that how this has happened? Because 10 years before, we had much less success rates, right? So when the IVF has historically started, we had 9-10% success rate, and it continuously increased. But now we can actually achieve more than 90% success rate by using different technologies. So I think it's a fantastic result, and I think it's a fantastic achievement. Then you can give the patient more than 90% success rate. I think it's absolutely unbelievable.
Because we are learning. As we said, we didn't know anything about endometrium before, about potential of implantation, about the immune communication in our body, about the different levels of the hormones and how they play the role, about the embryo itself. And this is like a big portion of success. It's coming from the embryonic factor. So we have 3 main directions which we have to control and point out for if we are analyzing the patient. This is an embryonic factor, uterine factor, and the extrauterine factors. And if we tick all the boxes and we have the checklist and we know what we are looking for and we know how to read the reports and the results, then we will improve the chances of this patient to be successful. In many, unfortunately, in some practices, doctors are following recommendations, and some recommendations are not recommending to check or to tick all the boxes in the very first trial for the patient. They are saying you can do this after you have 2 failed transfers.
Yes, unfortunately.
But 2 failed transfers, for some patients, again, back in Ukraine, we didn't have any insured IVF. We were responsible for the treatment success, and I felt responsible for also the fact that it wasn't very expensive treatment. And sometimes the whole family were collecting their money in order to bring this young couple to the fertility treatment point. And they were seeing a doctor as the one who can solve this issue. So it's a discussion. Should we follow the recommendation and start to check patient deeper after only 2 unsuccessful transfers or 3 unsuccessful transfers? Or can we include this into our clinical internal protocols faster? Then yes, maybe patient would pay for additional screenings, and we will increase a little bit, if again it's insured or not insured, we will increase the cost of the treatment, but we will increase significantly the level of success if we will have additional screenings performed even before the very first treatment. So this is a strategy which every clinic can build based on their experience and based on their level of success they want to achieve. Some practices, they are happy with overall European success above 30%. This is published. And again, how it's published. You mentioned UK, and IHFA is controlling that the data is true data. In some countries, unfortunately, marketing is just making the figures which patients would like to see, and this is something what helps patients to make a decision. But this data can be far from the real clinical data. So there are some other points which needs to be, after patient is in communication with the clinic, how deep they are checked, which screenings are performed, how which information doctor is asking from the previous experience of the patient, because this all plays the role. This will bring us to the understanding the point, how is it just a number, like another new patient, or the team is really willing this patient will become pregnant, and the fastest possible.
Absolutely, I fully agree, and I thank you for saying that we as physicians we are also responsible, not just treating the patients or managing the process, but also managing the process in terms of physical, mental burden and also financial burdens. Because if you are private institutions like Versys are and your clinics are, we have to find the fastest, cheapest, and the highest success rate treatment for the patient. This is also our very important responsibility in the process. So moving a little bit to the future now, okay? Because we know that we can achieve more than 90% success rate with some kind of technologies being used. Do you see any on the future, what innovations we are going to need to be involved, and how far we can still go with the reproductive medicine innovations? So what is the future of reproductive medicine will be?
And here again we are discussing about the regulations and the future and who will take responsibility. That's for me now, this is the biggest question, because as I said, I see that patients can be the ones who are forcing the changes to happen. But we always have 2 sides of the medal, and we know that the technologies, they need to be safe. There are many trials. Just today we were discussing about the webinar of the Levante. That's protein which is injected inside the oocyte, which potentially can improve aneuploidity. Because aneuploidity, this is one of the biggest potential which we can, if we can solve this, we can improve significantly our lifetime of the fertility successful treatment. Mm-hmm. Because that's for the patients who are still producing the eggs, but we know that something on the molecular level has been broken already there, and this is where we need to watch deeper in the molecular level in the oocyte. Oocyte is the huge cell in our body. That's the full organism inside, because this is how we learn about the maturation, how we learn about the metabolic potential of the oocyte, molecular, etc. And And this is the source, this is the environment which helps the embryo to develop. Sperm is coming totally naked. It brings just the DNA inside, but everything else, food and energy, is supported and provided by the oocyte. So if we will understand the oocyte, we will solve the embryonic issue, potential embryonic issue. But then we have uterine and the extrauterine. So for the uterine, we are having endometrium as a big black box so far. And there are many, many new things there as well. And we are very curious, and we are taking part in some trials to open this black box, because for the embryonic factor, I think we are good now. We have the technologies, and we work with the technologies where we know we can really improve. But this is not the level yet. We are collaborating with other startups and so on. However, here we need to understand that the lifetime of the clinical trial is very long, and patients want a solution
An
today.
immediate answer, yes.
And this is something what is, and who will take a responsibility if that will not be safe? We have a long, long list of what needs to be checked before we will try this. We can take responsibility, patient will take responsibility. She will say today, yes, I agree, I want to do this, but what if this will not work, or it will bring us to some point of the risk? Many of our patients are pushing us, or not pushing, or asking about other opportunities. We understand. I'm, as a woman in over 40, I do understand that if there is a goal and we want to achieve it, like there are different methods how, but still it's a level of risk and the responsibility.
In the past, we had a huge increase in success rate and in safety. So there has been several points which emerged the technology to become better. And I remember when we moved from the success rate like 20-30 to 50-70, and we in Versys, we have been able to do this and see this process, which is absolutely fantastic to have and to enjoy the advantages of this. What was the most important game changers in the development of IVF technologies, which has made us able to go over 50%? What was the major steps like vitrification, PGTA, thawing technologies, culturing? So what do you think that what was the most important points which really made us able to go over 50% in general terms?
I would say that absolutely we should start from freezing, because we know that slow freezing was very negatively affecting the micromolecular composition inside the cell and all the structures which are there, because the crystals were destroying the spindle and making problems there. So vitrification is very safe, and if there is a proper lab and the proper protocol and the embryologist who is well skilled for the freezing and sewing, and I'm very happy to work with the best ones. So I'm always saying freezing is very safe procedure to be. And if you, as a patient, making a choice to freeze the eggs, to freeze the sperm, to create embryos, to do testing for your eggs, that's another point. That would be genetic testing. Without genetics, we wouldn't be able to improve because of the natural embryonic selection. We know that very rarely we would get 100% eggs from 100% follicles, then we will get 100% mature from 100% eggs. At this, and then fertilization, then blastulation, euploidity. At each stage we have statistical loss, which is explained. We as a clinician, we know that it's explained. Patients not always accept all explanations, but still we know we can improve, and we are working in order to improve there, but there is some limits.
Uliana, with genetic testing, you mean pre-implantation genetic testing for aneuploidy, right? So PGTA mainly, when you say genetic testing.
PGTA.
So the PGTA is the technology which made us able to improve the results and making less miscarriages and shortens the time for having or achieving a healthy baby, right?
We are working with tested embryos 99% of the cases. We very seldomly we would have, I as a clinician would have a young patient, young couple, Now maybe in Slovakia, yes, some of the insured patients. So for them, we would say, like, it's on you. We wouldn't clinically recommend to do the genetic testing. But if this is a couple where a woman is already over 35 or the male is already in his advanced paternal age, we would recommend, because that's safety. If I would be a patient, I would never transfer non-tested embryo. What for? If we came to the point of having an embryo, this is very safe and very easy to make sure that this embryo is the one which brings us to the point of successful implantation, because aneuploid embryos would lead to miscarriages, and this will bring us to more complications about the uterine potential factor in the future, emotional burden for the patient and a doctor,
and financial.
So this is how we improve. But I would also mention the genetic testing for the individual, for the woman and the couple. We are seeing more and more early ovarian disorders, like premature ovarian failures, and they can be associated with the X-linked disorders. If we are not testing there, we can lose time, we can lose potential for those patients. If we are having patients with multiple unsuccessful treatments, having no blastocyst, we need to test patient for the potential disorders which are associated with the oocyte maturation, with the fertilization disorders or embryo development disorders. There is a group of patients, it's a low group of patients, but even if they are 2%, if we, from the medical background, we understand that this can be a point, we need to recommend to test it. And then as a couple, we can be a silent carriers of some mutations and same mutation for both. And then if we want to have a healthy generation, we need to check. If we are not silent carriers, then great, we should go just with the regular testing. If we are carriers, there is PGT-M, which is for the specific testing for the specific mutation, and then we will be sure that our babies are going to be healthy.
As you know, Uliana, we are the pioneer of PGT-A technologies with molecular genetic technologies in Hungary. We introduced several techniques like carrier mapping, PGT-M, and PGT-A itself. And now you know that PGT-A is not available in Hungary at all. What disadvantage you think that Hungarian patient has because they don't have an access for PGT-A technologies nationwide?
That's a limitation, because we are saying that genetic testing is an improvement and the safety in the IVF sphere. Meaning if this is limited or not allowed, we cannot practice this. We cannot improve success of our patients, and we cannot guarantee the safety which is possible within the inclusion of this technology.
Thank you. Uliana, let's move to one of the most important subjects, which is your favorite, is ovarian rejuvenation technology. And
Absolutely.
Then we get the point, which is your favorite. Could you explain what's the concept behind the whole ovarian rejuvenation method and treatment modalities?
As I said, we started from the oocyte donation. Like, I started my practical career, and I've seen, and still I see, the difference between the ovary, which is young and healthy and full of the follicles, and someone who is in her advanced maternal age and with the totally different conditions. However, even at this point of patients over 40, majority these are patients with the PMOS, like now we are calling the polycystic ovarian syndrome, and this is great that we started to explain it more deeper and properly. Those patients may still have follicles, patients over 40 with the preserved ovarian reserve, but still the mechanisms are different for the oocyte maturation and the follicular development. And this is the capacity which ovary can produce, can guarantee for us as women. Unfortunately, ovary is the first organ to age in women's body, and we can live more than half of our life without potential support, hormonal support. This is very important as well. But also if the fertility sphere hasn't been completed, like this task for the woman hasn't been completed, if we will think about potential of preserving the function of this organ for a little bit longer, this is possible. We need to learn it more deeper, but from what is preliminarily known right now, if we will start it in time, we will be successful in this treatment. Just very simple parallel from the rejuvenating solutions for our skin. We haven't been practicing this for like 20, 30, 50 years ago, and we can see the difference how women look like in their 50s 20 years ago and now. And in general, population is living longer because we know about longevity, we know about improving our health, and aging, this is the process not to live longer, but to have higher quality of life in the future. And ovarian function is for higher quality of life of women's future. So
Absolutely.
It solves both solutions, hormonal and fertility potential.
But also we see problems in terms of eggs numbers and quality in the younger population, which we called recently diminished ovarian reserve, or DOR. Also rejuvenation modalities, technologies could help with these patients.
Absolutely yes, but we need to categorize the patients. If she is a genetic carrier, we will have of disorder, let's say fragile X or X group linked disorders, then that will be one strategy. And we have to understand our success in the approach which we will be offering to this patient. But if she is a non-carrier, and then we need to understand what is the factor which impacted the fact that we are having the DOR or the premature ovarian failure. So that's about the patient, but the strategies are there. My point of interest, since I started my PhD in 2019, 20-ish, and completed 2020. That was a hard time to do it. However, it was about PRP. At this time, we had only PRP options available, and we focused on the vascularization, on the short-term processes which can be improved in the organ. And this has been proven that it works. Now we have more options, and we are learning about these options. It's still a limited data, but if patient is willing to collaborate and trust to the physician under the consent being signed, we can practice approaches for the ovarian rejuvenation as PRP with exosomes or exosomes alone. That can be autologous or allogeneious material, and the stem cells as well, autologous or the allogeneious. But what is the most important after rejuvenation, depending on which task we are solving, that's the monitoring of the patient. We cannot do rejuvenation and forget about the patient.
Uliana, as you already started to say, that there are three different types of rejuvenation technologies. One of them is a PRP, which is a plasma-rich protein therapy. The second one, the stem cell, and the third is exosome. Could you explain a little bit to Hungarian patients what are the differences between these three actually available rejuvenation technologies?
Okay. So the PRP, that's something what has been practiced.
How does it work in practice? How do you do this actually?
That's quite simple technology. We just need the blood of the patient and we centrifugate the plasma. There is a specific tube, so also how we prepare and the protocol of the centrifugation and even the protocol of the preparation of the patients, like the recommendation given about the food and supplements are also important because this is her biological material. So what we are having in our body, that will be used for the healing and the rejuvenation process in the different part of the body. And ovary is an organ which we need to target directly. There are many patients and many rejuvenating techniques which are very common now and are like fancy, the peptides, NIDs, etc. So I just wanted to mention that if we rejuvenate systemically our body, that's great, but ovary is an end organ. It will not receive, or there is a very big question how much of this rejuvenating solution, if it's given systemically, ovary will receive.
Going to reach the ovary.
If we need to reach the ovary, we need to reach the ovary. So that's important. And the PRP is prepared in the morning before the procedure. It's a fully sterile conditions, and then we are injecting the plasma, which is rich with the platelets, into the ovary, in the cortex, where we know potentially most of the follicles are, under the guidance of the ultrasound. Procedure is very similar as the egg retrieval procedure, and quite often, because many of our patients are international patients, we combine this with the egg donation, with the oocyte collection, the follicular collection.
Okay, well, also PRP can be introduced into the endometrium, and also sometimes also to the vaginal wall to refresh the vaginal function.
Absolutely.
Do you have some experience in these two different way of usage?
Yes, we use in different ways, but if you are talking about fertility potential, then the ovary is the target. If you are talking about preparation of the patient for the implantation and atrophic endometrium or just improvement for the potential implantation, then this is the PRP to the endometrium. But then we need to understand that this treatment will have a limitation in terms of time. If we are targeting stimulations, if our target is to get eggs, we need to rejuvenate ovaries. But then we know that we will not be ready for the embryo transfer within next 6 months. We can do rejuvenation to the endometrium, but until the 6 months pass, we would need to repeat this treatment again because this will not work. There is a timeline.
Why stem cell is better than PRP, or is it better? How does it work?
It's different. If we are talking about PRP, this has a limit of activation of the potential follicles which are already on the way to be developed in the next round or 2 or 3 rounds of stimulations during the future period. But if you are talking about molecular changes like micro level in environmental changes in the tissue, we are considering exosomes and the stem cells as a potential factor, rejuvenating factors, which can improve the microenvironment in the ovary. And what is important, what we can bring from the stem cells and the exosomes, these are the microRNAs, which there were and still these are ongoing studies checking the level of the microRNAs in the follicular fluid, how they can improve the TECA and the granulosa cell production, which are helping to grow and maturate the oocyte. Because the oocyte is growing inside the oocyte cumulus complex, and this is what we are first collecting and what the lab is seeing. We don't see the oocyte immediately. We see the group of cells, and how good this group of cells is, this will impact the maturation of the oocyte. And that development is very important. And what we are seeing, what increases with age of the patient, this is the level of empty follicles and the level of the oocytes which are not completely mature. And by targeting the microenvironment in the ovary, we believe that we can improve, and we see this in our statistical data as well. We are improving the maturation rate and the oocyte collection, something what we call follicular oocyte index. This is how many follicles we are getting from the number of follicles we are puncturing.
Could you explain the exosome? Because it's absolutely a new term in Hungary. What does it mean and how to use this?
Exosome is an internal vesicle of the cell, which is full of the protein, lipids, and the microRNA, those which are feeding the cell with the proper molecules which are needed. They are not cell themselves, so if you are talking about the risk associated with these rejuvenating solutions, because this is a short-term practice which we are having, of course we need to evaluate the safety of this procedure, then we would say that the exosomes are safer potentially because they are not cell themselves. They cannot differentiate into the different cell, and they are not going to grow inside the organ. However, so both PRP and the exosomes, they will push the follicles which we already have, which is our reserve given, and the potential of the stem cells is to get a differentiation, to become a new potential follicle. But that's something what needs to be controlled, and we need to learn from this.
Absolutely. Which is the main target for patients among these 3 technologies? Which the patients mostly asks What is the most popular of this treatment? Which one?
We usually recommend based on the patient profile. So once we are seeing the patient and analyze her antral follicle count, her IMH and her FSH, because the hypophyseal and the hypothalamic regulation is something what is also very important. Because of seeing very more advanced maternal age patients, I would not call them very old, but
yes, advanced maternal age.
Yes, so these patients, they would need something stronger than the PRP. So each rejuvenation would fit specific range of the hormonal and the reserve profile of the patient.
Okay, so last point to touch a little bit of AI, because I know that you and your clinic and also your embryologist lab director, Birol Aydin, is very much fan of AI technologies like we are. Could you explain what benefit we could have during the laboratory process or clinical approaches using AI in our daily practice?
Absolutely. We are using AI starting from the communication with our patients, because it's impossible to remember, I still myself do our best, and I remember many patients, many different stories, specifically since I see and meet them in person, then I definitely recognize who is the patient. However, we communicate a lot online with the patient or the initial consultation, so we use AI on that stage. Then we have AI for the monitoring of their previous records and the stimulation outcomes already with us. That also helps us to learn this individual patient and understand her probabilities, what needs to be changed, what worked better for her, what was the correlation between the dose and the outcome, the trigger and the outcome, etc. And then in the lab, or not yet in the lab, but for the management in the clinic. We have a software which helps us to monitor a patient at each stage, starting from the reception, then the blood collection point, the operation area, the embryology, and the tanks with the stored biological materials. This also prevents the errors which potentially may happen in the lab with mixing the biological materials. In the oocyte donation, we are using it a lot for analyzing each donor profile and her also previous history. We do matching for the countries where a profile of the donor cannot be open. Then AI helps to match the picture of the patient and the picture of the donor, because we used to select it only based on the color of the eyes, yes, color of the hair, and so on. But this tool is very, works definitely better than just picking the profile. And then in the lab fully, sperm selection, oocyte selection, and the embryo development, everything is controlled by AI. However, AI is not the final decision maker. The human is the decision maker, but AI brings all the data together and all the estimations and the probabilities together.
You were always the pioneer of newest technologies and latest technologies to be implemented in the clinical practice. As a last question, could you imagine how the reproductive medicine will be in 10 years from now on?
First, it's always a teamwork. And not only me was a pioneer, without the lab and my great partner and the colleague embryologist Birol Aydin, that wouldn't be possible. And I think the benefit for the patients is the fact that there is a teamwork between the lab and the clinical team, as well as you do. So that's a great approach. And we've been discussing this. Even when we just started the Ovogene as an egg bank, we were always talking what's next. We have eggs, how we will use them in the future. So now with the MRT, we came to the point that we are not using them as we were thinking we will be using them in the beginning, because we thought it will be just a full egg and we will use it as an egg, as the regular oocyte donation, fertilizing with the sperm, creating embryos. Now we separate, we use just the cytoplasm. Maybe in the future we will use only the mitochondria or some other organelles, or we will understand what else can be changed. So there is a bright future in fertility. Just it should be all safe and responsible in terms of the practices, There are many techniques as gene editing techniques and cloning and different other spheres where we still, I think, need more experience and more data, and we are always two hands up for this. However, it will change a lot. I'm thinking about my kids, and every parent would think, will they be in this sphere or something different, etc. So their practice will be completely different, and I think it will be much more successful than even we are now. They will not call something what is still a black box. I hope it will be all well understandable and well explained, but for this we need studies, collaborations, support and trust.
So with this last question, I'd like to thank you for being with us today, Uliana. I think your message was absolutely amazing and important for the Hungarian patients, because you gave so much useful and very important information regarding the cross-border treatment, pricing, success rate, egg donation, rejuvenation technologies, and even the future. So thank you for sharing this with the Hungarian patients. You know that we Hungarian physicians and also our patients, the Hungarian infertile populations, are suffering a lot because of some not well thought political changes, but we hope that in the future we'll have a brighter future for our patients. But I think this is one of the most important things to bring the most important information to our patients, which was delivered fantastically by you today. So thank you for this exhausting and tiring podcast today, and thank you for driving and coming over from Bratislava for this. And I hope to welcome you in the near future also in Budapest. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That's really my great pleasure, and always happy to be with you, because that's a building of the team of like-minded physicians globally. That's really so important, and that would be a benefit for our patients. And I know the changes recently in Hungary, and I wish that the issue with the fertility treatment locally will be resolved, because that's for the benefits of patients. They need to have access to all possible technologies in the country. Still, there will be cross-border available for something, let's say, next level, but the basics, if the country is willing to have more kids without proper fertility, and even like this option of building the competition, which is great to build a competition to improve the success and improve the options for patients, that's something what should be considered, and I believe it will be. So good luck in this.
Great. Thank you very much, Uliana. Thank you. Nagyon szépen köszönöm, hogy részt vettetek a mai nagyon fontos és nagyon érdekes részleteket tartalmazó podcast beszélgetésen. Köszönöm a vendégünknek, Uliana Dorofejevának, hogy külföldről ide utazott ezért, hogy ezen a beszélgetésen részt vegyen. Kövessetek minket a podcast csatornáinkon, a YouTube csatornára iratkozzatok föl, és még nagyon sok érdekes, izgalmas témával jelentkezünk a jövőben. Köszönöm a részvételt és a figyelmeteket.